The last locker. I never liked staying late at school, but sometimes I had no choice. That night, I was the last student left, finishing up a project in the art room. The janitor, Mr. Reynolds, gave me a tired nod before heading down the hall. It was quiet, too quiet. As I packed my things, I heard something, a faint metallic clank. It came from the hallway. I peeked out and saw nothing, just rows of lockers stretching into the dimly lit corridor. Then I heard it again, a locker door creaking open. I walked slowly, my footsteps barely making a sound. The noise was coming from the far end, near locker 319. That was strange. Nobody used that locker. It had been sealed shut for years after something happened. A few years back, a student named Darren went missing. No one ever found him. Some kids swore they heard knocking from inside locker 319, but the school sealed it, called it a prank, and moved on. But now, it was open. The door was slightly ajar, swinging just enough to cast a long, thin shadow on the floor. I held my breath and stepped closer. A cold draft seeped from inside. My fingers tingled as I reached out, and then, from the darkness of the locker, a whisper, raspy, desperate. "Help me." I ran. I didn't stop until I burst through the front doors, gasping for air. The next day I told my friend about it. He just stared at me. "Dude," he said, "that locker's still sealed. It hasn't been opened in years." I laughed it off, told myself I was imagining things, but when I passed by 319 later that day, I saw something, a single fingerprint, smudged against the metal, from the inside. The substitute. You ever get a bad feeling about someone? Like, the moment they walk into a room, everything just feels wrong? That's how it was with our substitute teacher. Mr. Alden, tall, thin, with this slow, deliberate way of moving, like he was thinking about every step. His voice was calm, too calm, like he was trying to lull us into something. And his eyes? Dark, too dark. Nobody knew where he came from. Our regular teacher, Mrs. Carter, just disappeared one day. The school said she had a family emergency, but that was weeks ago. Then one morning, Mr. Alden just showed up. No one saw him come in, and no one saw him leave. At first, he seemed normal, strict, but not unusual, until I noticed the way he watched us, like he was waiting for something. Then, kids started getting sick. One by one, they'd leave class pale and dizzy, whispering that they felt drained. The school nurse called it a virus, but I wasn't so sure, because every time someone left, Mr. Alden looked stronger. His skin seemed tighter, his eyes brighter, like he was feeding on something. Then, one day, it was my turn. I felt it the second I walked into class. Heavy, like the air had thickened around me. The lights buzzed overhead, but everything seemed darker. Mr. Alden smiled, and I swear, I saw his teeth weren't normal, too sharp, too many. I told myself I was imagining it, until he called on me. "Come here," he said, gesturing toward his desk. His voice was smooth, hypnotic. I almost stood up. Then I saw the floor, right beneath his feet. It wasn't solid. It was shifting, writhing, like shadows trying to crawl into the light. I bolted, grabbed my stuff, and ran straight to the principal's office. When I got there, I begged them to check room 206, but when we went back, the room was empty. No books, no desks, no Mr. Alden. Just an abandoned classroom covered in dust, like no one had used it in years. But I know what I saw, and I still don't know what happened to Mrs. Carter.
The intruder. I never thought my part-time job at the school library would be anything but boring. Just me, a stack of overdue books, and the soft hum of the air conditioning. But that night, someone broke in. It was around 7 p.m. The building was supposed to be empty. I was shelving books when I heard a noise, soft at first, like the rustle of papers. Then, footsteps, Slow. Deliberate. I peeked down the dim hallway. The main doors were locked. No one was supposed to be here. Then, I saw it. A shadow, just past the lockers. Not a teacher. Not the janitor. Someone else. They were standing completely still. Facing the lockers. Not moving. I ducked behind a bookshelf, my heart hammering. My brain scrambled for explanations. A lost student? A teacher? But deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. Then the footsteps started again. Closer this time. I held my breath. Through the tiny gap between books, I saw him. A man. Tall, wearing dark clothes, a hood covering most of his face. But what froze me in place wasn't how he looked. It was what he was holding. A crowbar. He wasn't lost. He was looking for something. Or someone. I backed up slowly, careful not to make a sound. My phone was at the front desk. Too far. Then, crash, a bookshelf toppled over. Not mine. Somewhere else in the library. The intruder's head snapped toward the noise. And then, he moved. Fast. I took my chance and ran. Through the aisles, past the desks, into the hallway. My only thought was get out, get out, get out. I reached the exit and yanked on the handle. Locked. Of course. Behind me the footsteps. Closer. I turned down another hallway, my eyes darting for a place to hide. The janitor's closet. I slipped inside, shutting the door just as the footsteps reached the hall. Silence. Then, breathing. Right outside the door. He knew. The knob twisted, and then, sirens. Flashing red and blue lights through the window. Someone must have heard the crash. The door never opened. By the time the cops searched the school, he was gone. They never found him. No sign of forced entry, no security footage. But the next morning, taped to the library door, was a note. 4 words, one scribbled in shaky handwriting. I saw you first.